was like a million other hallways and a million other houses, but I knew somehow that what awaited me on the other side of the bedroom door was unique in a truly horrible way. My vision narrowed and my heart slammed around inside my chest as I reached for the knob with my left hand. I still had my spraying equipment on, and my right hand still held the hose handle. I opened the door and stepped inside to see a child in the bed, the covers pulled up to his chin. It was the same child I'd seen yesterday from outside the window. Of this, I had no doubt. He was a Hispanic boy, with carefully cut black hair and delicate features. His head was turned slightly away from me on the pillow, his eyes closed. There was something wrong with him, something about his body. "Hello," I said, voice barely above a whisper. The boy made no move. I reached down with my left hand. I had to see what the covers were hiding. I had to see what was wrong with his body. With a shaking hand, I threw the covers off, and the sight that greeted me filled me to the brim with terror. I pulled up in front of the house while still in mid-argument with my ex-wife.
"I don't care what you do in your spare time,"
I said, talking into the Bluetooth headset.
"Just don't do that stuff around Jaden."
As she started to answer me, probably to insist that she hadn't done any cocaine while Jaden was with her, which was a blatant lie, I cut her off.
"I'm at work,"
I said.
"We'll talk about this later."
I hung up before she could say anything else. Lacey had been struggling with addiction for several years. In fact, it was one of the main reasons we'd gotten divorced. I'd tried all I could to get her help, but you can only do so much for someone who doesn't think they need help. She wasn't as bad off as many other addicts. She held down a job and was a decent mother when she wasn't high as a damn kite. So there wasn't really a ton of evidence I could bring to the judge to give me full custody of Jaden. I didn't really want to take away her visitation rights anyway, but if things kept up as they were, if Jaden continued to tell me about the little parties Mommy had with strange men, then I would have to do something drastic. I didn't want my son growing up around that kind of behavior. I got out of the van and went around to the back to get my gear on. I worked for a pest control company specializing in mosquitoes. So what I did all day was drive around and spray insecticides around houses on my route. Some houses opted for the natural option, while others wanted the chemical spray. I suddenly realized I didn't know which option this house was supposed to get. So I pulled out my phone and checked the app. Chemicals. I donned my mask, my latex gloves, and then the equipment that I used to spray around the yards and in mosquito hotspots. The gear was specially designed for spraying insecticides, but it looked similar to a leaf blower, and it sounded like one when in operation. As I walked toward the house, I realized I didn't recognize it. Must be a new customer, I thought. It was a 2-story house, made with brick and white painted wood. The driveway was on the left, leading toward a closed garage. But I spotted a gate to the backyard on the right side of the house. I walked up and peered over the wooden fence, making sure there were no dogs in the yard. Once satisfied, I went to open the gate, only to find it locked. "Great," I muttered. One of the employees back at the office was supposed to call 24 hours ahead to alert the homeowners that we'd be there. This way, the homeowners could make sure the gates were unlocked and that all pets were inside. But even with that heads up, homeowners often forgot to unlock the gates, or they left their dogs outside. Since there were no visible pets, I reached over the gate to feel for the kind of lock they had. I found a small metal bar shoved through the latch, so it couldn't be opened from the outside. I pocketed the metal bar, opened the gate, and stepped inside. Seeing that the coast was clear, I started up the motor on my insecticide sprayer. I moved along the fence line, spraying to create a barrier and to eliminate any eggs or larvae. Then I went along the edge of the house. As I passed one of the back windows, I glanced inside, looking through a narrow gap between 2 curtains. There was a kid asleep in a bed, a young boy. I usually made it a point not to look into people's windows, but I hadn't really been paying attention, and I just glanced up. Shrugging, I moved on, hoping I didn't wake the kid up. I finished the backyard, heading back out the way I'd come. making sure to replace the small metal bar that served as the gate lock. Then I did the front yard. Once I was done, I put the equipment back in the van, took my mask off, and then grabbed one of the cardboard door hangers we used to let homeowners know we'd been there. I filled in my name and the time I'd done the spraying before taking it up to the front porch. I noticed the doorbell camera as I put the door hanger on the doorknob. Giving a little wave for the recording, I turned back, got into the van, and headed for my next house. As I was heading back to the office at the end of the day, I got a call from my boss. "Lawler," he said, "I just got a call from Mrs. Reynolds at 2678 Orchid Avenue. She said we missed her today."
Orchid Avenue?
I said, searching my memory.
Was that on my route?
According to the computer, it was. I suddenly remembered the house where I'd seen the kid sleeping.
Oh man,
I said.
I think I did the wrong house. I was on Orchid today, but I must have pulled up one house down.
My boss, a good-natured guy named Fred Maynard, laughed. "Someone got free mosquito control today."
Yeah, sorry. I was distracted by Lacey. I'll be sure to get 2678 Orchid tomorrow, first thing.
All right, just wanted to check. You on your way back?
I'm about 10 minutes out.
Good deal. See you soon. I hadn't thought much about that sleeping child all day, but as I hung up with my boss, I started thinking about him. There was only a few inches between the two curtains, so I didn't get a good look at the entire room. But there was something strange about the scene. Something I couldn't quite pinpoint. Thinking about it produced a small knot of anxiety in my stomach. I shook the odd feeling off and concentrated on my driving. I had to return to the van, punch out, and then head to pick Jaden up from my mom's house where he stayed after school on weekdays. By the time I got home with Jaden and started making dinner, it was nothing more than a quickly fading memory from another monotonous day at work. After Jaden got his homework done, we ate dinner, watched a little television, and then I sent him up to get ready for bed. "Ready," he called from upstairs. It was the sign that he was ready to get tucked in. I got up from the couch and headed upstairs with a smile. It was my favorite part of the day. As I stepped into Jaden's room, I saw that the bed was empty.
"Where the heck is Jaden?"
I said aloud to the room. There was no answer.
"I guess I'll have to find him, but when I do, he's gonna be in big trouble."
That got a snicker from down the hall. That was our ritual, a quick game of hide and seek before reading and then sleep. I turned and stomped down the hall, roaring like Godzilla.
"I'm gonna get you!"
Jaden laughed from the linen closet. To make things a little more interesting, I went past the closet and looked in my bedroom, still thumping around and talking in a low, scratchy voice.
"Where the heck is he?"
I said just outside the linen closet door. Then I ripped it open and grabbed my son, tickling him as he shrieked with laughter. I threw him over my shoulder and marched into his room, plopping him down on the bed as his laughter died down.
"Okay, buddy,
I said.
what are we reading tonight?"
While Jaden was considering the question, I heard a noise from downstairs. The back door had a squeaky hinge that I'd been meaning to oil for a few days now, so there was no doubt in my mind that what I heard was the back door opening. I turned toward Jaden's bedroom door, pulse skyrocketing.
"Stay here."
I said as I moved out to the hall. Padding to the top of the stairs, I listened hard for any other sounds that would indicate an intruder in the house. I was hoping Jaden had accidentally left the back door cracked, although I couldn't remember him going outside since we'd been home. I peered down the stairs for several seconds before gathering the courage to move down them. I didn't have a gun in the house, but Jaden did have a baseball bat in the hall closet. At the bottom of the stairs, I looked around, seeing no signs of anyone in the house. Then I moved quickly over to the hall closet, opened it, and got the baseball bat out. I moved down the hall, feeling slightly better with the bat held over my shoulder. When I turned into the kitchen, I saw that the back door stood open. Looking around, I saw nothing out of place. And when I stepped through the open back door, I peered into the dark backyard. Everything seemed normal. After shutting and locking the back door, I checked the entire house, making sure no one was inside. When I passed by Jaden's room, I found that he was asleep. I had a moment of regret since we never got to the story, but it couldn't have been helped. I had to make sure we were safe. My son's safety always took priority. I padded back downstairs and moved into the kitchen to make myself a snack before bed. As I leaned the bat against the wall, something caught my eye on the counter. I looked closely, seeing a faint smudge of dirt on the countertop under the cabinets where I kept the dishes. As I bent down to inspect it, I realized it was dirt left by a boot. I know I hadn't put my foot on the counter recently, and the print was much too large to belong to Jaden. I looked at the back door for a long moment, thinking furiously. Why would someone come into my house and step on my counter? I couldn't imagine. It made no sense. I considered calling the police, but I knew there was little they could do. Nothing was missing. If they caught whoever had been in my house, they could charge them with trespassing, but that was about it. And I knew that calling the police over would wake Jaden up. I didn't want to put him through that. He'd been through enough with the divorce. He was finally getting back to normal, and I didn't want to take that away from him. So I wiped the boot print away with my hand and rechecked all the doors and windows. They were all locked. When I went to sleep, I did so with the baseball bat near at hand, and it took a long time for sleep to come. I pulled up to 2678 Orchid just after 11 o'clock the next morning. As I stepped out of the van, I glanced at the next house over, 2676. It was the house I'd distractedly sprayed yesterday, and it was where I'd seen the child sleeping on the bed in the back room. But now I wasn't so sure what I'd seen was so innocent. I'd awoken at 6 in the morning with a nagging feeling that something terrible was happening in that house. It had grown from a small knot of anxiety to a swollen tangle of dread, and I could no longer ignore it, no matter how much I wanted to. Something deep inside was trying to tell me that what I'd seen at that house and the boot print in my own house were somehow connected. So instead of getting right to work at 2678, I walked down to 2676 with all my gear on, as though I was getting ready to spray there, but I hadn't turned the motor on yet. I had to get a look in that back window again. I had to see what was really going on in there. I moved to the back gate and reached over, removing the makeshift lock again. Then I walked back as though inspecting the ground for hot spots, like I did at every other property. I angled toward the back of the house, and as I passed the back window, I glanced up. The curtains were fully closed. I couldn't see inside. After glancing around to make sure I wasn't being observed, I tried to push the window up with my free hand. It was locked. Panic started to seep into my chest. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I was that what I'd seen was something terrible. Flashes of a child lying on the bed kept coming to mind, but instead of the kid I'd actually seen, it was my son. It was Jaden lying there, lifeless, something wrong with his body under the sheets. Before I had a chance to think about what I was doing, I was up on the back porch, reaching for the knob on the back door. It turned, and the door opened. I was fairly confident there were no dogs in the house, because they often barked their heads off when they spot an intruder like me through the window. But I stood at the back door, latex-gloved hand on the doorknob, listening.
Hello?
I called.
Hello? Mosquito control.
I decided I would make something up if anyone was home. But after a few moments of answering silence from the house, I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. There was nothing amiss about the interior. It was a lived-in, middle-class house. I saw a dining room and attached kitchen directly ahead. To my left was a living room. I went that way, walking past the dark wall-mounted television toward the hallway. The first door off the hallway was closed, and I knew it had to belong to the room I'd glanced into yesterday, the room with the child in it. My vision was narrowed, and my heart slammed around inside my chest as I reached for the knob with my left hand, my right still holding onto the hose handle for my spraying equipment. I opened the door and stepped inside, half expecting to see my son lying there. But it wasn't Jaden in the bed, covers pulled up to his chin. It was the same child I'd seen yesterday, and in the very same position. He was a Hispanic boy, with carefully cut black hair and delicate features. His head was turned slightly away from me on the pillow, his eyes closed. Now that I was close to him and looking at him from a different angle, I immediately identified what had been bothering my subconscious. It was the way his body looked under the covers. The lumps were all wrong. "Hello?" I said, voice barely above a whisper. The boy made no move. With the force of a haymaker, I realized why. He wasn't breathing. His chest wasn't rising and falling. I have to get out of here, I thought. I have to call the police. But instead of running, I reached down with my left hand. I had to see what the covers were hiding. I had to see what was wrong with his body, what had been done to him. With a shaking hand, I threw the covers off and released a small, fearful cry at what I saw there. The boy wasn't a boy at all. The only thing human there was his head, which had been severed and sewn onto the body of a large stuffed bear. That was why the bulges under the covers had looked so strange. They were not caused by the bony limbs of a child, but by the thick and stuffed limbs of a child's play toy. I moved out of the bedroom as fast as my numb legs could take me. My breath came in shallow gasps. As I stepped into the living room, I saw that the television was on, and there was a familiar sight there. I did a double take, freezing as comprehension accosted me. On the television was a wide-angle view of my kitchen, from a camera placed on top of my cabinets. The boot print, I thought. Back when Lacey had lived in the house with us, before the divorce, she had put some fake plants up on top of the kitchen cabinets to provide the room with some decoration. Although I hadn't put it together yesterday, I knew now that one of those plants was almost directly above where the boot print on the counter had been. The intruder had placed a camera there. As my senses came back to me, I resumed my trek to the back door, but a man stepped around the corner from the kitchen, a pistol in his hand. He looked at me from behind boxy eyeglasses, his pale eyes peering out from under a head of thin blonde hair. He wore khaki shorts over thick, pale legs. He had a salmon pink collared shirt tucked into his shorts, which were fastened with one of those braided belts. And on his feet he wore tan-colored Timberland work boots.
"You're trespassing on private property,"
he said in a nasally voice.
"I'd be within my rights to shoot you here and now."
I stood, vibrating and seemingly stuck to the floor. The man smiled thinly.
"You found my snuggle buddy, Kendrick. Your name is Kendrick, isn't it? That was the name on the piece of cardboard I found on my doorknob yesterday. Your yard has been serviced by Kendrick. Of course, I saw your face on my doorbell camera, and with your name, it wasn't too hard to find out where you live. Your company isn't great about maintaining employee privacy."
I didn't see anything, I said, grasping at straws.
Oh? So you just come into people's houses to look around all the time? Is that what you're leading me to believe?
I had no answer. He already knew everything.
You didn't really know what you saw yesterday, did you? Once I saw that pest control company had been on my property, I went to check on my snuggle buddy and saw that I'd left the curtains open a crack.
He shook his head.
Silly me. But I couldn't be sure if you'd seen anything. I had to know. Which is why I paid you and your son a little visit and left my little camera. It's also why I set this little ruse up, just in case you decided to come back to play detective. And I was right.
I can just go, I said. I won't say anything. The man laughed, the sound grating.
Yeah, right. I'm sure you just go on with your life. No, you had your chance. If you'd never come back here, I could have let it go. But you had to come back. You had to see. But it's all the better. My snuggle buddy's head will start to rot soon, and I'll need to replace it. Luckily, I know a beautiful little child who's about to be without a father.
The man raised the gun, finger tightening on the trigger. I spun around to run just as he fired, and felt a thudding impact on my back that knocked my breath away. Stumbling and trying to suck in a breath, I turned back down the hall I'd come from, ducking back into the bedroom with the child's head. I swung my equipment pack off, hearing the man's footsteps getting closer. When he turned into the doorway, I threw the heavy pack at him even as he raised the gun. The pack hit the outstretched gun, knocking it out of his hand. He cried out as he stumbled back under the weight of the pack. I knew from the way he'd reacted that I'd somehow hurt his hand, but my only thought was of escape. Finally able to pull in a breath, I turned and ran to the window, throwing the curtains open and reaching for the lock. I quickly undid the clasp and got the window lifted several inches. But before I could get it open enough for my escape, the man ran up behind me. I half turned, but I wasn't quick enough to ward off the blow that was coming. The man slammed his elbow into my head, which in turn crashed into the window, cracking the glass. I threw myself back at the man as he wrapped one arm around my neck. We stumbled and fell onto the bed, both fighting for the upper hand. He managed to tighten his hold on my neck, choking me. I slammed my right elbow into his chest 3 times before he loosened his grip, enough for me to twist around. As I got to my feet, the man got to his, reaching out and grasping my throat with his hands. He slammed me back into the wall next to the bed, pinning me there. At first, I tried to get his hands from around my neck, but it proved futile. So I did the only thing I could. I reached out and grasped his neck, strangling him even as he strangled me. I knew that I'd already lost a few precious seconds. I was certain I would lose consciousness before he would. As my vision narrowed to small, blurred circles, I looked down and saw what the man had called his snuggle buddy, and a desperate idea came to mind. I let go of the man's neck with my right hand, reaching down towards the child's head. I was just able to touch the dead boy's nose with my fingers, but I couldn't reach any further. The man had me pinned to the wall, and I was getting weaker by the moment. The pillow, I thought, dropping my hand down and managing to grab the edge of the pillow. I dragged the pillow closer to me, getting the head within reach. I had only seconds of consciousness left. If this didn't work, I'd be dead. I grabbed the dead boy's head in my right hand, lifting it, stuffed bare body and all. It didn't weigh more than 10 pounds altogether, and I managed to grip it around the top of the skull like a smooth stone. With one desperate movement, I slammed the boy's face into the side of the man's head. His grip loosened, and he turned his head to see what he'd been hit with. All his attention had thus far been on my face. I hit him again, this time slamming him in the face. Blood spewed from his nose as the boy's face collapsed. He let go of me, stepping back in a daze. The stitching had come loose from the violent movement, and the bare body hung from only a few remaining stitches. I turned the head and smashed the man in the face with it again. This time, the bare body fell away, and I was left holding a child's damaged head. The man fell to the floor, his face a bloody mess. I fell on top of him, gripping the boy's skull in both hands, and I brought it down on the man's face again and again and again. By the time I was done, neither head was recognizable as such. The man took his last wet breath through his ruined face as I sat against the wall nearby, breathing heavily. It was a kind of poetic justice, I thought. The man had killed the boy, and in a way, the boy had killed the man. I didn't want to know how many others the man had killed. I doubted this was his first. But as I pulled out my phone to call the police, a sense of calm settled on me. I thought of Jaden as I dialed 911, and I had no qualms about what I'd done. After all, protecting my family took priority over all else. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video. You can